Every parent experiences nervousness when their child steps out into the world on their own. For parents whose children go to college, they may envision a journey filled with self-discovery, independence, and even occasional misadventures. College is often the place where they navigated their way through friendships and mistakes and the pursuit of their own dreams. It's no secret that college-aged kids and young adults are more likely to fall victim to peer pressure and also manipulation in some circumstances. Parents typically focus on warning them about the obvious dangers, like drinking, drugs, keeping track of their drink and cup at parties, and staying safe in groups. However, there is another commonly overlooked danger that to most of us may seem unimaginable. Colleges can actually be the ideal breeding ground for cult recruitment, especially given the illusion of security on campuses and in dorm rooms. So in today's final episode of Culttober, doesn't mean we're not going to talk about cults in the future, guys, but it's officially Culttober is done, but we will cover other cults. But in today's episode, we're going to talk about how a master manipulator not only ruined a group of friends' college experience, but many of their entire lives as well. So today's story is the story of the Sarah Lawrence College cult. Now, you may have watched the Hulu series on this, but I am telling you, there is a lot more that was not included. And this is the cult whose leader orchestrated some of the most sick and twisted acts that I've seen out of this cult series. And that's saying a lot. Even more disturbingly, this leader was someone that no one would ever even suspect, because it was a member of the group's very own family. All right, guys, before we jump into it, smash that like button, smash the subscribe button. I'm Annie Elise, and let's get right into it. It's really important to me to only work with sponsors of products that I actually genuinely love and personally use. And today I'm going to share with you guys one that I use on a daily basis. And this one has quite literally changed my life. And I use it every single day. Now, if you sleep like a baby every single night, this is definitely not for you. Turn it off, fast forward, you don't want to hear this. But if you have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep, get ready to have your life changed. I promise you that. Dream is a cup of healthy hot cocoa that is formulated to help you get your best night's sleep. It comes in a variety of flavors, and they are absolutely chef's kiss delish. They have cinnamon cocoa, sea salt caramel, which is the one I drink because it tastes like hot chocolate, chocolate peanut butter, golden milk, and chocolate raspberry. It literally tastes like dessert, guys. But get this, there's no added sugar, and it's only 15 calories. I have such a hard time staying asleep usually, and this has just been, honestly, it's changed my life. It makes me fall asleep, stay asleep. I wake up, I'm not foggy like I am when I take melatonin. I'm clear, I'm well rested, I'm happy, and I'm not like a psychopath with my husband. So it makes everybody in the household happy. Now get this, here's the best part. Because I am a personal user of Beam, I love Beam, and they're a great partner of the channel, they gave me early access to their biggest sale of the year. So if you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, the stuff I drink every single night, take advantage of this and get up to 50% off. But this is for a very limited time, and it's when you click my link or scan the QR code on the screen and then use my code CYBER at checkout. Look, guys, the numbers don't lie. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported that Dream helped them get better sleep. And I am definitely part of that 93%. So grab yours now for 50% off, but you better hurry because who knows how long the deal will last. Click my link in the description or scan my QR code on the screen, and remember, use the code CYBER at checkout. And let me just say now, sweet dreams, my friends. Sarah Lawrence College is a renowned private liberal arts college located in a suburban county called Bronxville, New York. It's about 15 minutes north of New York City, and it is surrounded by beautiful landscapes and beautiful historic buildings as well. Sarah Lawrence College, or SLC, which a lot of people call it for short, attracts students really from all walks of life who are interested in becoming artists, writers, actors, philosophers, teachers, and so much more. Some famous alumni include Vera Wang, Barbara Walters, J.J. Abrams, Jordan Peele, and Sigourney Weaver. It's known for fostering a very strong sense of community amongst the students, having very small class sizes and more of a personalized approach to learning. Now, SLC is one of the most prestigious and expensive colleges, consistently making the list of the top 10 highest tuitions in the United States, at roughly around $60,000 a year. The buildings of SLC are a mixture of English Tudor and Georgian-style architecture, and some of the dorms are even repurposed historical mansions. It's a beautiful campus. There's a mix of more standard modern-style dorms, but some of them honestly look like something that you would see out of Hogwarts. And I'm only saying that. Ever watched Harry Potter myself? I've never read the books, but I'm saying that because I've seen the commercials, like on Freeform and the movies are on TV. It looks like something out of Hogwarts, guys. So in 2009, 18-year-old Daniel Levin started his freshman year at SLC, and he was assigned to Hill House. It's an apartment-style dorm where most first-year students live. He and 3 other students would share a suite with Daniel and with a young man named Santos Rosario. Those 2 would be in one room, and students Gabe Chazanov and Max Mamis would be in the other. The 4 of them became very fast friends, and they ended up even expanding their group to include an outgoing girl from down their hall on the 3rd floor named Claudia Drury. Now, for most freshmen, this would have been their first time away from home and away from their families, and many of their parents were as far away as California. Hanging out during all of their free time and bonding during those first nerve-wracking months of college started to really form the group into a tight-knit little family. Not long into freshman year, Santos started dating a girl that he had met in his literature class named Talia Ray. Now, Talia was attached at the hip with her best friend Isabella Pollok, who also lived in Hill House. This led to Santos, Talia, and Isabella basically becoming 3 peas in a pod, and practically inseparable. Isabella was shy, quiet, and had actually come all the way to SLC from Texas, so she had no family nearby and no other friends besides Talia. Getting close to Santos expanded both Talia and Isabella's circle of friends as well. But Daniel, Max, and Gabe weren't really thrilled at all about it at first. They still wanted to hang out with their roommate Santos, be the, 3 amigos, be the tripod, and they wanted to all be alone sometimes. And they kind of thought that Talia and Isabella were a little weird. Regardless, in order to stay close to their friend, they stuck it out. Over time, Isabella and Talia ended up being another addition, though, to their little SLC family. The more the group all got to know each other, the more that everyone started to realize that Talia and Isabella had both been through a lot in their lives, which could explain why they seemed kind of different, kind of weird at first to the rest of the group. In comparison, they had all come from relatively stable households with good parents who had good careers. Santos's parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic and had to work extremely hard to not only support him, but also support his siblings, but they were all still very close. Isabella, on the other hand, came from a much rougher background, with her father in and out of jail and her mother being addicted to alcohol for a very large portion of her childhood. Even through these rocky circumstances, Isabella was able to earn a full-ride academic scholarship to SLC. But being around peers who came from wealthier and more stable backgrounds often made her feel out of place. Some people even referred to her as reclusive. However, all of that changed when she met Talia Ray. Talia was from New Jersey, but she and Isabella related to each other on a lot of things, especially having a parent spend time in jail. Isabella did seem to open up more as she got closer to Talia, to Santos, and to the rest of the group, but she still didn't open up too much about her past. The same, though, could not be said for Talia, who was a wide-open book, telling anyone and everyone who would listen her entire life story. Well, actually, it was more so her father's life story. In small dorm room hangouts, at big parties, at bars, anywhere, it seemed like all Talia ever wanted to talk about was her dad. And the way Talia talked about him, he really did seem to have a pretty interesting background. But most kids weren't constantly talking about their parents, not at college anyways. At parties when they were out trying to have fun or goof around in dorm rooms, they wouldn't be talking about their parents. But they later say that her constantly bringing up her dad would bring down the vibe too, and it was just kind of annoying at times. Nobody wants to hear about that when you're trying to rage as a college student. But as her friends, they could see that he was someone who was really important to her, and he had been through a lot in his life and actually inspired her to want to become a lawyer and a social justice advocate. You see, Talia's dad was actually in prison, and according to her, it was all a huge miscarriage of justice. She said that her dad had tried to save her and her sister from her abusive mother, but her mother apparently ended up working with some high-level government agents who were out to get him and lock him up. The way she explained it, her dad almost sounded like Liam Neeson in that movie Taken, or like an Edward Snowden-level whistleblower trying to uncover this huge government conspiracy that was against him. Most people probably wouldn't have believed anything she said. That is, if she didn't have photos of her dad with politicians, world leaders, celebrities. But why would people like that be out to get him just for trying to save his children? Even though the group of friends were a little tired of hearing stories about Talia's dad all of the time, they did their best to be understanding. She made him sound like an amazing guy, and they even said that it would be cool to meet him someday. But honestly, they never really expected to, or actually put too much thought into their friends' parents. When freshman year was coming to an end, the group started thinking about what they should do about their living situation for the next school year. They had all grown so close, and after freshman year, students could pick where they wanted to live, so they could still continue to live in dorms, other more apartment-style college housing, or get a house or apartment off campus. Talia took the lead in figuring out where the group should live, and she suggested that the best place would be the Slonim Woods, because unlike Hill House, which was all the way on the far left side of campus, Slonim Woods was much closer to everything, but just far enough away that the faculty or security wouldn't always be up in their business. It would also mean that everyone could have their own room, a huge kitchen, and a living room, and would basically just be a fun, unsupervised year-long sleepover with all of your best friends. They needed 8 people to apply for a Slonim unit, so Daniel suggested his good friend Juliana Janis from his poetry class. She ended up fitting in right with the group, and ultimately they were accepted for their sophomore year to live in the Sloman 9. Sophomore year started out amazing for all of the group of friends. Now that they were closer to the rest of the buildings at school, they were able to sleep in a little later, still make it to class on time. They were hosting parties, playing video games, eating together, and they were becoming even more of a family now that they were all living under one roof. Daniel also started dating a girl named Raven Juarez, and she spent the night with him most of the time, basically becoming a 9th roommate. Another person who didn't actually live there but became a very permanent fixture was Talia's friend from home, Iben Goikachia. Iben and Talia had actually dated at one point in high school, but even after ending things, they remained close friends. Her father, who was in the military, became like a mentor to Iben and suggested that he join the Marines after high school. Iben ended up serving tours in Afghanistan and Iraq and suffered from pretty severe PTSD after witnessing several of his friends be killed during combat. After his service, Iben decided to attend Columbia University and actually helped conduct studies on combat veterans with PTSD. However, in another tragic turn of events, both of Iben's parents ended up coincidentally passing away within just a few months of each other, which sent Iben into an even deeper depression. So he decided to take a year off of school to focus on mentally healing, and ended up spending a lot of time with his old friend Talia. Over time, he would become good friends with the rest of the group in the Sloman 9 as well, and being around a good group of people was very positive for him. Now, everyone else in their group had their typical young adult problems like anxiety about school, grades, relationships, transitioning into adulthood, but they were all generally happy and thriving in their college life. That was except for Isabella. Isabella had actually gone through a really rough breakup and was having a very hard time coping, but her best friend Talia was there for her as a really close support system. Even though she had a lot of other things on her mind, she was there for her best friend. So one day, when everyone happened to be home at the same time, Talia called a family meeting, and she excitedly explained that her dad would be getting out of prison soon. She explained that he didn't have anywhere to go and wondered if it would be okay with everyone if he crashed there for a little while until he could find his own place. Now, honestly, no one really minded that much. Everyone knew how huge of a deal it was for Talia to be reunited with her dad, and no one wanted to be the jerk to say, no, your dad can't stay here for just a few weeks, when she hadn't been able to spend time with him in years. Plus, it's not like their place was a cramped little dorm. It was 3 stories, and everyone had their own room. So they told Talia that it, of course, would be fine. And they kind of were interested at the idea. They had seen all of these photos of him with politicians, celebrities. They had heard all of these grandiose stories of the life that he had lived. There was a little intrigue there. And not only were they interested, but no one thought that it would even affect them at all. They thought it would just be like another regular house guest. However, Talia's dad would turn into anything but a regular guest, and he would ultimately affect all of their lives in one way or another. Talia's father, Lawrence Ray, was actually born Lawrence Greco Jr. on November 16, 1959. Just a few years after he was born, Lawrence Sr. and his mother Ingrid had a second son named Carl, and the family went on to live in Brooklyn, New York, and New Jersey. Lawrence Jr., who would go by Larry, was said to be a little bit of a troublemaker growing up. You see, he was very smart, and he knew how to get what he wanted, especially after Lawrence Sr. and his mother Ingrid began going through a divorce. This was really hard for both of the boys, but especially for Larry, who was always much closer to his father than his mother. Ingrid was granted custody of both of the boys, but Larry was said to throw fits about wanting to be with his dad. Ingrid tried to make Larry happy by going on trips to places like Disney and buying him all of the toys that he wanted, and it kind of seems like he picked up on being able to manipulate his mom if he just whined or misbehaved. However, even though she tried her best to keep him happy, she ended up letting Larry and Carl go live with their dad some of the time as well, which honestly seems like what should have happened in the first place, but I think during that time it was a commonplace for mothers to be granted full custody. When Larry was 19 years old, Ingrid ended up remarried to a man named Gordon Ray in 1978. So Larry and his brother Carl would later change their last names from Greco to Ray as well. 1 year later, Larry decided to join the military instead of going to college. He was always said to be the kind of guy who could make friends wherever he went and could talk to anyone about anything. People described him as being like a chameleon, because even if he didn't know much about what was being talked about, he could pretend like he did, and no one would even know. He was also a great conversationalist, and after his service, he was able to talk his way into a job on Wall Street, despite having no degree and no experience. By spending time with successful people, he was able to network and make a lot of contacts. He was able to use these contacts to start working as a consultant for various industries like insurance, construction, finance, and even gambling. Eventually, he even started his own commercial insurance company. Larry became good friends with a businessman who asked him to join in for a partnership with him for a popular nightclub in New Jersey called Malibu, and then became a partner for a very well-known Italian restaurant where he organized fundraisers for politicians. He met and became friends with prominent members of the military after sharing stories of his own time in the Marines. And due to his experience and his contacts, he was even contracted by the CIA to help with various international affairs, primarily with Russia. In 1988, Larry married a woman named Teresa Guarino, and 1 year later, they had their first child, a daughter named Talia. It wouldn't be for another 11 years until they had their second daughter, Ava, in the year 2000. So in 1995, Larry became really good friends with an NYPD detective named Bernie Carrick. The two actually became so close that Larry was the best man in Bernie's wedding. Larry was said to be really generous with his friends as well when he was able to be, and if he could use any of his contacts to help Bernie, then he wouldn't hesitate to do so. In 1997, Bernie had been working as the New York mayor at the time, Rudy Giuliani's security guard and driver, before being promoted to director of the NYPD Investigations Division. That year, one of the important Russian politicians that Larry had made friends with during his time assisting the CIA was going to be coming to New York, and Larry knew that he could arrange a meeting between the politician and Mayor Giuliani as a favor from Bernie, which would definitely help his friend advance even more in his career with the NYPD. Just 1 month after arranging the meeting, the mayor appointed Bernie as commissioner of the Department of Corrections. However, in the nightclub business, Larry didn't just make friends with good people like detectives, members of the military, or politicians. He, of course, was also introduced to other types of people, like members of the mafia and other organized crime groups. With Bernie in his new position in the Department of Corrections, a friend from the FBI asked him if he had anyone with any contacts to the mafia. Now, Bernie knew that Larry had done some business with some members of the mafia before, and even though they technically aren't supposed to, it's been speculated that the FBI agreed to compensate Larry to become an informant. Larry told the FBI agent that he had information about the mafia running something called a pump and dump stock scheme. In this type of scheme, stockholders spread false rumors to artificially inflate the price of a cheap stock. They convince other people to buy the stock, and when the price goes up, they quickly sell their own shares for a profit. This leads to the stock price crashing, and then the people who bought it are at a complete loss. Now, even though it had been insinuated that Larry was being compensated for being an informant, the FBI agent started to kind of get a weird feeling about Larry's intentions, especially after some of the information he gave ended up being false. The more that the agent looked into it, he actually discovered that the only reason Larry had agreed to get in close with the FBI is because he himself was in on the scheme too. So Bernie claimed to have no idea that his friend was actually in on the scheme, and I guess as a way to make up to the agent, he later helped him get a job as a bodyguard for Donald Trump. But regardless, that same year, Larry's second daughter Ava was born in 2000, and he was indicted along with 19 others for that scheme. Larry tried to reach out to Bernie and practically begged him to talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office to put in a good word for him, but Bernie told Larry that there was basically nothing he could do. Larry, in turn, felt betrayed by Bernie, who he had helped so much help advance his career, and then to add insult to injury, during the lengthy court process, Bernie's career kept advancing more and more. In 2001, after 9/11, as the NYPD police commissioner, Bernie was regularly on national TV, became an advisor in Iraq, and even had a jail in Manhattan renamed after him. Seeing Bernie go on with his life and basically forget about Larry started to make him feel jealous and vindictive. In 2003, Larry really had no choice but to plead guilty to the fraud charges, but he was only given 5 years of probation. However, the court warned him that after all of the lies and manipulation of the FBI and the court, that if he did anything to violate probation, they would throw the book at him, and he would spend the rest of his time in prison. After all of the recognition that Bernie got during and after 9/11, President George W. Bush decided to nominate him to become the Secretary of Homeland Security. Larry's resentment had only grown for Bernie, and because of this, he and his wife's marriage started to suffer as well, because it seemed like all he could talk about or think about was how to make Bernie pay for his betrayal. Soon after his nomination, it magically came out that Bernie had once hired an undocumented woman as a nanny for his children, which is a huge no-no for someone wanting to be the Secretary for Homeland Security. Larry also leaked information to a news outlet that he had actually paid for part of Bernie's wedding, used his mafia contacts to get thousands of dollars worth of free labor to remodel his home, and paid to furnish his house, which would have been the money that Larry got through the scheme he was convicted of. So due to all of this, Bernie was publicly humiliated and was forced to withdraw his nomination from the secretary position, and his name was even removed from the jail in Manhattan. Not only that, but Larry released information about Bernie having an affair. Due to so many skeletons coming out of Bernie's closet, the FBI ended up opening investigations against him, and he also ended up being charged with felony tax fraud and false statement charges. Even though the charges against Larry only resulted in him getting probation, Bernie actually ended up spending 3 years in prison for his charges. So you'd think that by getting payback and literally going above and beyond to ruin Bernie's life, that he would start to calm down a bit and go back to normal since he got what he wanted. However, even though he was presenting his feelings as anger, he was actually really hurt by Bernie not having his back, even though any logical person would have been able to understand that he wouldn't have been able to get him out of that situation anyway. So after that, it just seemed like Larry's mental state was permanently changed, and almost like he couldn't trust anyone anymore, and he was constantly paranoid that his friends were all out to get him. Eventually, his wife Teresa had decided that she had had enough, and she decided to file for divorce in 2004. Now, by that time, Talia would have been around 15 years old, and she was 100% a daddy's girl through and through her entire life. When Larry started becoming increasingly more erratic and paranoid, he'd often vent to Talia, and she would believe anything that her dad said to her. When Teresa filed for divorce, Talia wholeheartedly blamed the marriage ending on her mom. A few months after the divorce filing, Larry showed up to where Teresa and the girls were living, and she ended up calling the police, claiming that Larry had actually hit her. When the police got there, Talia told the police that her mother was lying and that she actually had been abusive to all of them for years. The police had no choice but to open up an investigation based on Talia's claims, and Larry was given emergency custody of the girls. During their investigation, Talia and Larry claimed that Talia had been touched inappropriately by Teresa's father, and that Teresa knew about it. They told the investigators all sorts of very specific and disturbing claims, but when they spoke to Larry and Teresa's daughter Ava, she had a different story. Even though she was only 4 years old at the time, when they asked her if her mom ever hit her, Ava reportedly laughed and said, "That's what Daddy told me to say." Ultimately, the investigation was closed and the allegations were said to be unfounded. This made Larry extremely angry, and he decided to go make several different websites where he could write lengthy blog posts and post in huge letters very disturbing allegations against Teresa's family member. And he even had Talia make one saying that the Department of Children and Family Services does not care about kids and does not care about victims of abuse. During the divorce and the custody proceedings, Teresa's attorney requested that Larry be given a psychological evaluation due to his increasingly unhinged behavior. And I'm going to quote what the evaluator said because it is pretty interesting. He said that evaluating Mr. Ray is literally because he is able to manipulate and control almost any situation in which he finds himself, including a psychological interview with a forensic examiner, no matter how experienced that examiner may be. Mr. Ray is very good at what he does. Mr. Ray can be utterly charming, and one can be disarmed by his childlike simplicity and smile. But Mr. Ray is no child. He is a calculating, manipulative, and hostile man. It was the examiner's belief that Larry had manipulated Talia and Ava into making those allegations, and said that they fit no discernible pattern ever reported to this examiner, who has been evaluating families for over 20 years. After the custody hearing, the court ordered for Larry to return Talia and Ava to their mother, but when he refused, he was held in contempt of court, and he was sentenced to 6 months in jail. In Larry's mind, the whole reason behind Teresa's actions is because she had somehow been convinced by Bernie to work with him to get back at Larry. So as he sat in jail, his brain concocted more and more outlandish conspiracy theories, like George W. Bush and Rudy Giuliani were trying to silence him because he knew secrets about 9/11, because it couldn't have just been that he was becoming irrational and that his wife wanted the best for their children. No. It was all a massive conspiracy, brought on by the President of the United States, who was working with Bernie to get back at him. So when Larry was ultimately released for his contempt charge, he started dating someone else pretty quickly, and this person quickly saw just how paranoid and crazy he was becoming. During an argument, his new girlfriend ended up having to call the police after Larry allegedly held her down and put his hand over her face in order to stop her from leaving his apartment. He was arrested and quickly released on bail, but while he was out, he took Talia with him to stay at a friend's house in New York City. Even though his girlfriend ended up dropping the charges against him, the courts determined that getting arrested for a domestic dispute was a violation of his probation. I guess him being held in contempt and put in jail for 6 months wasn't. But as promised, the court threw the book at him, and he ended up having to spend the remaining 3 years in prison. After listening to everything her dad said, and after spending so much time with him, Talia was convinced that all of these conspiracy theories about her mother and Bernie were true, and she refused to live with her mother, Teresa. Instead, she emancipated herself, and she went to live in youth shelters until she was able to graduate high school and then go on to college. To make matters worse and to make Larry even more paranoid, Teresa actually ended up entering a relationship with Larry's brother, Carl, which in my opinion, even if Larry was a jerk, it's still a pretty low blow. But Larry being Larry was just not going to let that go. So he had his daughter Talia make a website accusing Carl's son of sexually violating her as well as Teresa's father. That entire situation basically solidified the end of Larry and Carl's relationship and Talia's relationship with not only Teresa's family, but her uncle and cousins on her dad's side as well. However, she did stay close to her paternal grandparents, including Larry's stepdad, Gordon, but they had since moved to North Carolina. So after she was able to finish high school, she was accepted into Sarah Lawrence College, where she knew right away what she wanted to do. She wanted to become a lawyer so that she could help people like her dad, who in her eyes were unjustly accused and incarcerated. And like we talked about earlier, Talia was just as consumed with the conspiracy theories as her dad, and talked about it almost constantly to her friends at school, and made sure that they knew just how amazing her dad was. That kind of had me wondering too, if maybe Larry told Talia to really hype him up to her friends, because he knew that when he got out of prison, he wouldn't have anywhere to stay. Her friends have said that when they were looking for housing for that sophomore year, Talia was the only one to take the lead in finding them a place. So I wonder if Larry told her to get a big place that would be paid for by her full ride scholarship to school, make sure that her friends know how awesome he is. That way, when he got out of prison, all of them would be okay with him coming to stay there. Now that's just a theory there, and it could honestly be that Talia just really liked to talk about him all the time, whatever, and whatever the reason. When it was coming time for Larry to be released, Talia's friends seemed perfectly fine with him coming to stay with them for a little while. However, I'm not sure any of them would have been quite as okay with it if they knew how long his stay would end up becoming. When Larry finally arrived at the group's apartment, Talia was obviously ecstatic to have her dad back. Her roommates could see just how special and important it was for him to finally be out of prison, and it was actually pretty heartwarming to see a reunion like that. Larry would be staying in Talia's room and sleeping on the floor on an air mattress. But right away, he started cleaning around the house, doing dishes, and even cooking huge meals for all of the roommates. He was kind of basically like a sorority house mother, just in this case, he was actually one of their dads. Now, as you can imagine, an apartment with 8 college kids, plus some others living in it, was probably pretty chaotic and messy, and they actually appreciated him cleaning up after them. They also appreciated getting to eat home-cooked meals for a change rather than the dining hall food all the time, cooking up top ramen, you name it. However, Larry stepped up in other ways too. Larry, Talia, Santos, Isabella, and Ivan all would stay up late for hours, listening to him tell stories about his time in the Marines, his time in prison, and all of his other life experiences. He was a good listener too, though, and it really seemed like he took a genuine interest into what was going on in their lives as well, and he provided some insightful advice that they really did appreciate. However, the rest of the crew, Daniel, his girlfriend Raven, Gabe, Max, Claudia, and Juliana, all kind of felt like things were getting a little weird. It was like they were having these nightly heart-to-hearts, and the vibe in the house was always so serious now. With a dad always around, they weren't really partying anymore or having video game nights, and some of them just started wondering just how long he would be staying, since it didn't seem like he was making any moves to find his own place. None of them said anything, though, because they didn't want to be insensitive to Talia, who was happier than she had ever been. Larry had also been made aware that Isabella was going through that really hard time with her breakup, so he would talk to her alone for hours as well, trying to help her heal, help her get through it. The group started to notice that the more time that Isabella spent around Larry, the more she started opening up. She had been depressed after that breakup, but other than that, Isabella was always quiet and reserved. But after now spending all of this time with Larry, it seemed like she had this newfound confidence about her. The half of the group who were not really in Larry land also started to notice that Santos was acting a little bit different too. Santos had always kind of seemed like he lacked confidence, but after spending a lot of time with Larry, it was like he was walking taller. Even though all of these changes were good on the surface, some of the group still had reservations about him, especially as Larry and Isabella got closer. See, Larry ended up moving out of Talia's room and moved into Isabella's room, and when anyone questioned it, he said it was because Izzy was going through a lot, even more than they knew, and that she needed constant support. However, some of them started to feel like this fatherly vibe was kind of morphing into more of a romantic vibe with Isabella. But on the other hand, if she really was going through something so rough, he must have been helping her with it because she seemed to be the happiest around him and around Talia. The guys of the group, other than Santos and Ivan, honestly didn't think too far into what was going on and kind of wanted to just mind their own business. Raven, Claudia, and Juliana, on the other hand, were starting to feel like Isabella and Larry's relationship was possibly entering into a very creepy territory. Raven actually stopped staying over at the group's apartment, and her and Daniel started going through a little bit of a rough patch. Claudia's opinion on Larry ended up changing after she happened to be alone with Larry. Apparently, they had a really incredible, long conversation about Claudia's life, about things that she was struggling with, and it was supposedly like a therapy session that Claudia didn't even know that she needed. Anyone who knew Claudia said that she was extremely outgoing, basically the complete opposite of Isabella. She could be dramatic at times, but she was funny, lively, and an amazing storyteller. However, something Claudia told Larry made him believe that she might have some underlying mental health issues. So the next time that she hung out with Raven and Juliana, Claudia actually told them that she and Larry believed that she had schizophrenia. Now, Raven and Juliana were both completely shocked by that, and equally as shocked when Claudia started bringing up all of the supposed things that happened to her in her childhood that she never brought up before. Raven and Juliana told her that if she really thought that she had a mental health problem, then she needed to go and see an actual doctor, because Larry was not qualified to just diagnose her with something like that. But Claudia basically told them that she believed him, and that if they didn't, they could just F off. When Christmas break rolled around, Larry ended up calling Isabella's mother in Texas to tell her that she wasn't going to be coming home for the holidays. And when Isabella's mother asked why, Larry said that she had disclosed to him that she had been sexually violated as a child, and that she was traumatized from her mother's alcohol abuse and negligence. He told her that if Isabella were to come home, then she more than likely would take her own life. Now, Isabella's mom was completely confused, but Larry sounded like he was genuinely trying to help her daughter, and if staying in New York at school would keep her safe, then that's what she wanted to do. The longer Larry was staying at the apartment, and the more everyone in the house seemed to be getting closer to him as some kind of father figure-wise, the more tumultuous Raven and Daniel's relationship was becoming. She and Juliana actually went to the administrators of the school to ask if there was anything that they could do about a parent staying in student housing for so long. And they said that a parent had a right to visit their child, and that there wasn't anything that they could do. However, this was different. This was much more than just a visit. Larry had been there for months at that point, and all of the dynamics of their group were changing. Other than them drifting apart, Daniel had actually been struggling with questioning his sexuality as well. And when he talked to Santos about what was going on, Santos said that he should talk to Larry about it. He said that Larry helped him with his confidence and was also helping Claudia with all of her issues, and Isabella also was happier than ever. Clearly, Larry was the common thread in all of that. So Daniel agreed and asked Larry if they could talk. They ended up meeting at a coffee shop, and Daniel would later say that Larry's personality was almost magnetic. When he told him about his thoughts about possibly being gay, Larry told Daniel that he knew for a fact that he wasn't, and that he just needed help developing his masculinity. In regards to Raven, Larry told him to dump her, plain and simple. There was something about the sureness of Larry's advice that was comforting to Daniel. There was no wishy-washiness. It was just direct and straight to the point. He suddenly knew why everyone was so infatuated by him, and as soon as he left the coffee shop, he broke up with Raven through a text message. Larry stayed in the apartment for the rest of the group's sophomore year. And then again, at the end of the semester, everyone had to decide what they were going to do for the summer. Now, Daniel didn't want to go home to New Jersey and had been looking for apartments in the city with no luck. So Larry ended up asking him and Santos if they'd want to come and stay with him in an apartment he'd gotten to help him and Ivan renovate. With nothing really else to do, they both agreed. It was already pretty solidified that Isabella and Claudia would be going wherever Larry was going. But Talia actually ended up having to stay on campus for some summer classes. The apartment was located in the Upper East Side of New York City. There was only one bedroom, so Larry and Isabella slept in there, while Santos, Claudia, Daniel, and Ivan slept in the living room. The group started doing some painting, some light woodwork, but other than that, it really was just like a big sleepover, and they were all becoming even more close, literally and figuratively. even closer than they were in that 3-story apartment on campus. Larry decided that while they were all together anyway, he wanted to help them get their lives together so that they could reach their full potential. And that is just the crucial statement, I feel like, that is in every cult leader's dictionary. I'm going to help you reach your full potential. We've seen it in NXIVM, we've seen it in Scientology, we have seen it with Connections and Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. It's almost like they're drinking each other's Kool-Aid between the leaders, and that's the statement they always go to. So he did this. He wanted to help them reach their full potential. So he started waking them up at the same time, implementing a daily workout schedule, a daily eating plan, and said that his training in the Marines would turn them into the best versions of themselves that they could possibly be. They actually all started to get into pretty good shape too, which helped boost their confidence in turn. In addition to that, some of the group started to notice Larry taking a lot of Adderall every single day. He told them that it made him more productive and focused, and to help them be more productive with their renovations and new fitness goals, they should take it too. So every day, Larry would cut up Adderall for them all to take. But Larry was taking much more, pretty much around the clock, and it seemed like he never needed to sleep. Larry also had the group assist him in starting a new business venture, where he would purchase and sell domain names on websites like GoDaddy. That summer, while in the apartment, Santos talked to Larry about one of his sisters named Yalitza. She had been attending Columbia University, but ended up missing home and not making any friends, and struggling with depression as well. So Larry told him to invite her sister to the apartment. And when she got there, she said that everyone seemed to be happy, energetic, magnetic, and engaged in very meaningful conversations. It was obvious that everyone there was working to improve themselves in some type of way. So she decided she wanted to stay, and she wanted to start getting help from Larry too, who her brother had spoken so highly about. Not long after that, Yalitza and Santos's older sister Felicia came to visit her family. Felicia had been completing her residency at Columbia University in California so that she could become a forensic psychologist. She heard a lot about Larry, and in her own words, the moment she saw him, it was love at first sight. Now, personally, I really don't see the appeal, visually anyway, but apparently Larry felt the same way. So they started a long-distance relationship, and using money that he had earned from his domain name business, he started sending her expensive gifts, flowers, designer purses, and making her feel extremely special. Now, as you can imagine, this made Isabella extremely jealous. And as far as Felicia knew, they had a father-daughter type relationship, nothing romantic. Over the course of the summer, the group would listen to Larry talk to them about his philosophies of life and about how all humans are extremely sexual beings who want and need sex all the time. Let's go back to the cult dictionary, right? Full potential, bringing in sex, bringing in a lot of sex. It's the same recipe, right? The exact same recipe. Well, I guess not for Jodi Hildebrandt because she is like the anti-sex person for everything, at least male-related. But anyway, so Daniel didn't really feel the same way in all of this and actually wasn't really interested in sex unless he had an emotional connection with someone. Now, this revelation led to Larry wanting to help him with that aspect of his life as well. So Larry ended up having Daniel come into he and Isabella's room and started showing him different things that he could do to women. He'd have Daniel repeat what he showed him. He would watch Daniel and Isabella have sex, and then he would even join in as well. Santos would experience similar lessons, and even though it was uncomfortable at first, it became a pretty normal occurrence. And things started changing in other ways too. As the summer and the remodeling of the apartment progressed, Larry began bringing in more and more equipment, like an expensive table saw and power tools, which just crowded the already overly full apartment. Larry started to become paranoid about the group damaging the expensive tools, and even started accusing them of scratching them or breaking them. Anytime a scratch on a pan or a plate accidentally got broken, Larry was somehow convinced that whoever did it had done it on purpose. Whenever something like this would happen, they would have to have immediate family meetings in the living room, where Larry would literally interrogate the group until he figured out who was damaging his stuff and why. He would typically zone in on one member of the group to interrogate and would badger them for hours until they finally remembered doing what he was accusing them of doing and confessed to them. Talk about coercion. But that wasn't enough, though. They even had to give reasons for damaging his property. And in order for the interrogations to stop, they'd usually just try to tell Larry what they thought he wanted to hear. Since the whole group started joining in on the interrogation and siding with Larry against whoever was the target, they all started to wonder if they actually had done the things that he was claiming, and that for some reason they had just blocked it out or couldn't remember. He would make everyone write down all of the items that they had damaged as well, which would often amount to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he would tell them that they needed to be held accountable for their actions and that they had to figure out ways to pay him back. He would convince them to ask their families, their friends, anyone to give them money to help pay him back for all these damaged items. So much so that the group's family members were starting to get worried about why they needed so much money. Santos's parents had already been made aware of Larry's ties to the mafia, and they were afraid of what might happen to their family and their children if they didn't help pay back some of the money that Santos owed him. So they ended up selling jewelry, family heirlooms, literally anything they could to help Santos and Yalitza, who was also guilty of damaging things. And they even ended up having to sell their house. Larry's demeanor toward the group, besides Isabella, started getting more and more irrational, paranoid, and was even turning violent. If someone wasn't confessing to the outlandish accusations that Larry was coming up with, he would actually start to hit them until they were able to remember what they did. On one occasion, after not repaying Larry fast enough or possibly not confessing to something the right way, Larry actually had Isabella get him a hammer, and he proceeded to hit Daniel with it. He then grabbed Daniel's tongue with a pair of pliers and threatened to kill him.
Do you understand? See this how it feels? What if I pick you up like that? Can I pick you up by your tongue? Huh? Do you think I'm playing with you? Huh? Huh? You're a grown man, I'm a grown man. I don't like what you did. You hear me? Now one more time and I'm going to split your tongue in half. Do you understand me?
No. Yeah. Yes.
You doubting me, Danny?
No.
Huh?
Yeah. Yes.
Doubting me? Still?
No, I know that.
Huh?
I know that you believe me. Oh.
Want to doubt me more?
No.
Huh?
No.
I'll bust your face right here. I won't wait till I get downstairs.
No.
Take it to the bank. You and I are fighting it out tonight.
Okay.
Man to man. You can even have the hammer. I told you, beat me with it. You don't start telling the truth. I spent good money to find out these facts, you little piece of shit. And I'm telling you, listen to me.
Yeah.
Listen to me. Don't fuck around with lying now. Tell the truth. Next thing's gonna be out is your dick and balls. Did you like that the other night when your balls were getting strangulated?
No.
Huh? Watch what I do to them tonight. Apologize for lying to everybody right now. And this just now that you were lying.
I'm sorry for
Remember, they don't know the facts. I know them, dickhead. Now.
In another act of pure humiliation, Larry made this elaborate torture device consisting of dozens of little balls of tinfoil wrapped in saran wrap. He then forced Daniel to wrap them around his genitals, tightening it, nearly cutting off circulation in front of the entire group. At some point, Larry became paranoid that everyone had been hired by Bernie, who was somehow still out trying to get revenge on Larry. Before the end of the summer, Daniel and Claudia had to go on a study abroad trip that they had previously been accepted for. However, in order to keep Daniel's training going, he convinced him and Claudia to have sex on Skype so that Larry could watch and give them instructions. Larry had also been talking to his new long-distance girlfriend, Felicia, almost constantly on the phone or on Skype, and somehow had managed to convince her that because she was with him, she was in danger of the mafia, or of Bernie sending someone to hurt her. And it's not really clear if Larry actually sent someone to scare Felicia all the way out in California, or if he had just manipulated her so much that she believed him based on his word alone, but she ended up being terrified, so terrified that people were trying to kill her that she decided to leave her residency program just months before becoming a doctor. And then she moved in to that jam-packed apartment. It wasn't until she moved in that Felicia realized that Isabella and Larry's relationship was far from a father-daughter dynamic, and they pretty much all just became like a throuple. In order to help Ivan to overcome his PTSD, Larry began waking him up out of a dead sleep by banging on things and screaming in his face and trying to stimulate being woken up during combat. Now, this was supposed to somehow help Ivan, but it ended up making him only more anxious. After talking to another Marine that he had served with in Iraq, he convinced Ivan to come and visit him. Ivan's friend could tell that his mental state was worse than after they had completed their tours overseas. And sadly, Ivan actually ended up taking his own life. After Daniel and Claudia returned, Larry's paranoia had only gotten worse, and it's likely that the copious amounts of Adderall and lack of sleep was making him even more aggressive. Even as the group's junior year of college began, all of them besides Talia were still continuing to live in the cramped apartment. One day, Larry asked Daniel if he was still questioning his sexuality, and Daniel ended up saying yes. Now, this enraged Larry because his sex classes didn't seem to be working. In order to humiliate him and I guess scare the gay out of him, so he says, Larry forced Daniel to put on a dress and go walk to the lobby of the apartment. When he got back, he forced Daniel to use a dildo on himself in front of the group while they were instructed to laugh at him. Daniel and everyone else for that matter were becoming increasingly anxious and depressed, because it was starting to become clear that even if they wanted to leave, Larry had convinced them all that they owed him so much money for damages that they would be indebted to him anyway, and if he wanted to, he had the connections to seriously hurt them or even have them killed. Even through everything, it seemed like most of them still had felt like Larry had done something great for them, and that he was only trying to help them reach their full potential and overcome traumas in their lives. He had actually convinced Claudia that since her mother had a miscarriage before she was born, that there was no possible way that her parents could love her. He said that after suffering the grief of losing a child, they wouldn't have been able to actually love her, and Claudia ended up cutting off her family completely because of this. There was one day that Daniel ended up being alone in the apartment, which was also a very rare occurrence. There was usually always at least 2 or 3 people there, and no one ever really had time to be alone. So Daniel decided to go up onto the roof of the building, and honestly, he considered jumping off the roof to end his own life as well. Up until then, he wasn't able to see any way out of his situation, or a way that he could leave Larry and the group. However, as he sat there, alone, it occurred to him that he could really leave. The last physical attack from Larry had been the last straw, and he ended up going back into the apartment, packing up his stuff, and never talked to Larry again. Seeing Daniel leave gave Santos the courage to leave shortly after as well. In early 2013, back in North Carolina, Larry's mother Ingrid and stepfather Gordon ended up filing for divorce. Ingrid had cited in her paperwork that she believed that Gordon was experiencing signs and symptoms of dementia. In response, Gordon told her doctor all sorts of different things that Ingrid had allegedly done, which led the doctor to believing that she too was experiencing symptoms of dementia. And in order to protect herself and others, he had her committed. Ingrid and her lawyers believed that Gordon did this so that he wouldn't have to pay any alimony after the divorce was finalized. When she was finally able to be discharged from the hospital, she tried to return to the home that she and Gordon shared, but she found out that Larry had moved into this home. Claudia, Felicia, Yalitza, and Isabella. Larry told her that Gordon didn't want her there, and she ended up having to go and stay with her son Carl. So now at the new North Carolina house, Larry told the girls that he wanted to surprise his stepdad by doing some landscaping in the yard. He had them working day and night, with little to no sleep. He also locked up the food so that he could control how much everyone was eating. And the paranoia and accusations only got worse. For some reason, Larry started getting rashes all over his body, developed a limp, and had trouble walking and moving around, which, in my opinion, was probably the result of years of using an amphetamine and being sleep deprived, and it was finally catching up to him. However, instead of trying to figure out a logical reason for his declining health, the interrogations started again, and this time, he was convinced that one or more of the women was trying to poison him. When Felicia and Isabella developed their own injuries, or probably just exhaustion, they too must have been poisoned. So this time Larry zeroed in on Yalitza and began relentless intimidation, screaming, hitting, and questioning until finally she just admitted to poisoning the entire group. She was adamant that she didn't remember doing it, but since Larry said that she did it, then she must have done it. Eventually, he even got her to admit that her, Santos, and Felicia's parents had been working with Bernie and paid her to poison and kill him. Now, this confession sent both Felicia and Yalitza into a complete mental breakdown.
What's going on? Felicia, are you still here? What just happened?
Now remember, they were family, so Yalitza couldn't believe that she would actually poison her sister, Larry, or anyone else for that matter. And Felicia was unable to cope with the fact that her parents would want her and Larry dead, and would have asked her sister to poison her. So she no longer felt like she could trust anyone, and in an attempt for her brain to cope with the trauma, she actually went through a mental regression, and she began talking and acting like a small child.
Let's take a look at those Trump results, the Republican results in the city. Leave it alone.
Get out in the hall, fella. If you can't take it, you want to behave so atrociously. You want to behave so criminally destructive, because that's what you admitted to doing all day today and yesterday. Sit down.
I want to go to the bed.
Sit.
I want to go to the bed.
All right, please, come on. Come on, come here. Listen. You gotta sit down on the floor.
I want to sit.
Alicia, lay down.
Yalitza was so upset with herself, too, that she, too, actually attempted to end her own life. But thankfully, she was found in a parking lot and was taken to a hospital. After that, she was able to leave Larry and the rest of the group. But even though she was far away from them, she still struggled with knowing what was true and what wasn't. She knew that Larry had manipulated her, but he had literally caused her so much trauma that her inner voice now sounded like Larry, and she was still terrified of her own family and wasn't sure if she really did try to kill her own sister. She couldn't figure out what was true and what was false anymore. Her mind was mush, all because of Larry. After Yalitza was gone, Larry's interrogations started being directed toward Claudia, and even though Yalitza was gone, he believed that she too was hired by Bernie to poison and kill him. He even got her to record herself admitting to this and told her that if she didn't figure out a way to repay him, that he would kill her.
Please talk audibly, Claudia.
It's Sunday, March 22nd, 11:20 p.m. I'm making a video statement to say that I never stopped poisoning Lawrence Ray, Talia Ray when she was in my proximity, Isabella Pollok, Felicia Rosario. Also, when they were there.
Start from the most current time backwards.
Most current time.
And first, are you making this by your own free will?
Yes.
Anybody pay you?
No.
Anybody threaten you?
No.
Anybody coerce you?
No.
He suggested to Claudia that a quick way to make money would be to go and have sex with people. But she knew that by suggesting that, he was actually demanding it. So Larry ended up making a website for Claudia under a fake name, and she started sleeping in hotels in order to meet multiple men a day to sleep with. The first time that she got paid, she tried to keep some of the money for herself, but Larry came and he took all of it. Every few days, either Larry or Isabella would come to collect thousands of dollars from Claudia or have her send it to them via wire transfer, or through one of his many GoDaddy websites so that they could launder the money. One day, Raven and Juliana were sent Claudia's website, but someone else who knew her from Sarah Lawrence. They could tell that something was not right by the way that she looked, and they actually took the website to the police to report possible trafficking. However, the police didn't take them seriously at all, So in order to bring attention to the situation, they went to a friend who wrote for a local newspaper. Raven had Daniel, Santos, Max, Gabe, and Juliana talk to the writer, and they explained everything that had happened after Larry arrived to Sarah Lawrence. While researching Larry's background for the story, it was uncovered that he wasn't actually even in the Marines. He was in the Air Force for less than 20 days before being dishonorably discharged, which made a majority of his persona a complete lie, totally fabricated. The expose was published in April of 2019 and accused Larry of being a cult leader. When one of Claudia's clients saw the article, he brought it to her and told her that he would help her get out if that's what she wanted to do. When she read it for herself, she realized that she had been brainwashed by Larry all along. However, before Claudia could leave, Larry and Isabella came to her hotel room and accused her of tipping someone off about what was going on. They stripped her naked, put a plastic bag over her head, and beat her. Larry sat her in front of the AC and blew freezing cold air on her while he poured cold water on her body. Claudia thought that she was going to die in those moments. And not only that, but Larry had Isabella record the entire thing. When he was finally done tormenting her, as soon as he and Isabella left, Claudia got on a train and left. After the article came out, the police had no choice but to investigate the claims. When parents, the media, and investigators asked Sarah Lawrence administrators why a parent was able to stay so long in student housing, they claimed to have never gotten any reports of him staying there, even though Raven and some other concerned parents reported that he was staying there. So in order to collect proof that this Bernie guy was still trying to kill him, Larry and Isabella actually recorded a majority of the physical, sexual, and psychological abuse that was inflicted on the members of the group. In 2020, Larry ended up being charged with 15 federal counts of racketeering conspiracy, violent crime in aid of racketeering, extortion, sex trafficking, forced labor, tax evasion, and money laundering offenses. It wasn't until after he was arrested and Felicia had been away from him for an extended period of time that she realized how much psychological damage Larry had actually caused her. The court found that she was not responsible or involved in any of the extortion or sex trafficking of Claudia and was in such a poor mental state that she wasn't even aware of the majority of what was going on. Now remember, she was in a residency program, set to be a doctor, and he had such strong brainwashing capabilities that he was able to do this to her. The members of the group testified against him in court, and 2 years after his arrest, 63-year-old Larry Ray was found guilty on all charges, and he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The more difficult decision was whether or not Isabella should be charged as well, because even in the eyes of the group, she too was a victim of Larry. However, she helped launder the money that Claudia made, helped act out and record many of the physical assaults, and she even stood by Larry up until her trial. She also benefited financially from the money that Claudia had made. Ultimately, the courts could see that Isabella was brainwashed and manipulated by Larry, and she ended up only being charged with conspiracy to launder money. Isabella pled guilty to the charge, and she was sentenced in February 2023 to 4 years in prison. So I want to know what you guys think about this case, because this case is so different from the other cults that we have covered. Not only because it was what was considered a micro cult, but because it was actually one of the only ones that didn't have anything to do with religion, spirituality, or a false prophet. The trauma and brainwashing that the victims of the Sarah Lawrence cult endured will take years, if not forever, to heal from. Most of them weren't even able to bring themselves to speak to their families for a very long time, even after leaving the cult, because they still weren't able to decipher what was real and what was implanted in their minds by Larry. During the investigation, the FBI discovered files on Larry's computer of him actively researching the ways that cult leaders can manipulate and control their followers, so he knew exactly what he was doing. Some people speculate that he may not have even actually believed that Bernie was trying to kill him that whole time, and that he was just using that as an excuse as a way to extort more money after the whole damages ploy stopped working. Many people believe that Talia Ray should have been held responsible in this case as well, because she was the one to bring her father into the school, introduce him to her friends, and then basically abandoned all of them after he started acting crazy. However, others believe that Talia is Larry's first and most brainwashed victim, and it will probably be extremely hard for her to accept that her daddy used her to exploit and victimize her own friends. In this case, and in all of the others that we've covered in this series, we've been able to see that the majority of people who get enveloped in cults are educated people with good families and good support systems. Sarah Lawrence College is one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. Do you think that the college should be held responsible for not taking the complaints seriously? Because some have even said that if an apartment or a house is student housing, then the school administration, the RAs, or security should at least be making sure that the rules are being followed for the safety of the students. Some parents insist that their children live on campus rather than getting an off-campus apartment or a house because they believe that by paying for school-affiliated housing, their child will be more safe. In this situation, that unfortunately was not the case. Hopefully, by shining a light on this case, people will see that not all cults are huge groups with crazy-eyed leaders or outrageous spiritual beliefs. Sometimes, they can be as simple as a dad in a dorm room with a group of very impressionable kids, and they can still be just as harmful, if not more so. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the final episode of our Cultober series. I hope you appreciated all of the coverage and all of the insight, and we still will cover cults. It's not going to be a whole year until we go back to cults, but we just won't be doing one every single Friday. But we are going to be doing something every Friday. Every other Friday, I should say. And I would like to officially announce to you that every other Friday, beginning the first week of November, we will be doing Dark Chapters with Annie Elise. These are going to be different style videos. Some of the darker, more traumatic and horrific cases. The editing style will be significantly different, and we will be doing deep dives into some of the most horrific cases out there. These will be airing at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time every other Friday from now until, who knows, until the end of time. So I am beyond excited to share with you guys Dark Chapters. And they will be housed right here on YouTube. You will know where to find them, but I am very excited to share Dark Chapters with you guys. So make sure before you go that if you are not subscribed yet, you hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the other true crime videos we do, but also Dark Chapters as that launches next Friday. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in. And until the next case, stay safe.